Listen closely. What if most legendary prospect in all history, a physical titan unlike anything the sport had ever witnessed, saw his career vanish at age 27? Who do you blame? I already know your answer. Most claim he was difficult, that his father was the true poison. Too much pressure, not a team player. UV heard the lies. UV probably believed them, but that story was a cage, built by the powerful, to keep the truth buried deep. Everything you believe about Eric Lindros' downfall is exactly what they engineered you to think. Follow the real threads, the hidden truth, the secret decisions and the shadows in that room. This isn't about a difficult player. This is a dark transformation of the truth. A trainer's silence, a secret diagnosis, betrayal behind his back. This isn't about his failure. This is about what they did to him. If you're ready for the real story, stay tuned. Subscribe now. We unearth the legends the system tried to erase. In 1991, 17-year-old Eric Lindros was already a nightmare for the hockey establishment. He was too perfect, too soon, a monster who operated far outside the league's rigid norms. In the OL, he didn't just play. He dominated, scoring 71 goals in 57 games. Think about that, 71 goals. A teenager crushing grown men who had played professional junior hockey for years. They were bigger and older, but they couldn't stop him. Scouting reports read like ancient mythology. 6'5", 240 pounds, a shot that induced fear and hands of pure silk. Scouts weren't just taking notes. They were writing the prophecy of a king. Executives called him the most complete warrior since Mario Lemieux. His title was inevitable, the next one, a direct challenge to Gretzky's, the Great One. The hockey world wasn't just watching a prospect. They were crowning a god before his first professional shift. Then, Quebec called his name. He refused. He vowed never to play for a culture he deemed hollow and corrupt. The Nordics called his bluff, but Lindros never blinked. He sat out an entire year, winning Olympic silver, while the world waited for the monster to wake. And he waited. That defiance became the first mark against him. Arrogant, entitled, too big for his boots. But the man he defied, Marcel Aubert, was later exiled in disgrace, following horrific allegations. Lindros wasn't wrong. He was just an inconvenient truth for the league. June 30th, 1992, an arbitrator rules. The Flyers win the war. 6 players, including Peter Forsberg, 2 draft picks, and $15 million. The most explosive transaction in the history of the sport. Philadelphia didn't just sign a star. They took an oath they never intended to keep. Year 1, 75 points in 61 games, all rookie dominance. Year 2, 44 goals. Year 3, 70 points in a shortened season. He seized the Hart Trophy. The players themselves voted him the league's absolute best. He was only 22. Then came 1995, 47 goals, 115 points, pure, unadulterated power. In that era, only the legendary Mario Lemieux stood above him. When the Flyers took the ice, Lindros made the very foundation of the arena tremble. The Legion of Doom, Lindros, Leclerc, and Rembarg, the most terrifying line in hockey history. They didn't just score. They dismantled teams, shift by shift. They ground their enemies into dust. Even the great Lemieux acknowledged his power after the 1997 playoffs. It's your time. Lead them. A legendary blessing that changed the game forever. The greatest of his generation passing the torch in a cold, quiet hallway. 1997, the finals. Detroit didn't just win. They shattered the Flyers' championship dreams. Behind the elite stats, a terrifying reality was quietly taking root off the ice. Lindros was breaking, absorbing invisible damage that no highlight reel would ever show. March 1998, the ice turns lethal as Darius Kasparidis delivers a soul-crushing open ice hit. A legal strike by the rules, but a devastating concussion that paralyzed his season. Then came the betrayal. They sent a brain-injured warrior to a migraine specialist as medical science warned of the lethal dangers of repeated head trauma and pointed toward a dark, uncomfortable future for professional contact athletes. The Flyers ignored the warning, treating a shattered brain like a simple headache. Their culture was toxic. April 1999, Nashville. A routine game turns into a nightmare. A stab of pain, a bruised rib diagnosis, a deadly error by the trainers. That night, Lindros walked into a hotel room that nearly became his tomb. Morning came. He was found in a bathtub, pale, freezing, and drowning in his own blood. A collapsed lung. A teammate, not a doctor, realized the life-threatening truth. Defying management's orders to fly, Keith Jones stood his ground to save a life. He demanded an ambulance, refusing to let his friend die for the team's schedule, while the Flyers risked his life for a flight. A teammate fought for his survival. A father as fury followed. Carl Lindros put the terrifying truth directly in writing. That flight would have been his death sentence. The surgeons in Nashville agreed. There was no apology. Instead, Ed Snyder chose to spin a web of lies. He planted a rumor, blaming the life-threatening injury on a fake car accident. Police records were clear. No accident occurred. It was a desperate, failed cover-up. Doctors debunked the lies, the rumor died, but the stench of betrayal remained. To even float such a lie reveals the heart of a cold, calculated machine. This wasn't just management, it was a death trap disguised as a hockey franchise. The final act began January 2000. Another concussion rattles his skull. He returned too soon. Then March hit. Hal Gill delivered another devastating blow. Lindros went public. The medical staff had forced him to play while broken. He wasn't speculating. He was living a nightmare any competent doctor should have stopped. The response wasn't an investigation. It was a public execution of his character. They stripped his captaincy, a cold betrayal after he exposed their systemic failures. Years of negligence, a documented pattern of choosing the game over a human life. From collapsed lungs to mismanaged brain damage, the path of failure was undeniable. They tore the C from his chest right before the playoffs. Final humiliation. The message was unmistakable. Lindros is the villain, not the men breaking him. It worked. The media painted a legendary warrior as a difficult management problem. The institution won the narrative, yet the warrior had one final fight left. Game 6, the finals, against all odds. The legend returned to the ice. He scored. He played through pain would end any ordinary man's career. Then came Game 7, Scott Stevens, open ice. The Predator was waiting, head down, crossing the line. A hit that would change hockey history forever. Shoulder met skull. Unconscious before he hit the ice, his 6th concussion in months. To the world, a great hit. To Lindros, it was the end of everything. 5 concussions, Game 7, a tragedy waiting to happen. Stevens pulled the trigger, but the Flyers loaded the gun. Traded to the Rangers on August 20th, 2001. They called it an escape. It was actually the aftermath of a war. In his New York debut, Lindros exploded for 73 points in 72 games. He wasn't Ty Ghost yet when everything clicked. He was still a monster on the ice, but the Titan who averaged 1.36 points per game, trailing only legends like Lemieux and Jag, was fading. That dominant force was slowly being replaced by a man just trying to survive the shift. The sheer physical terror that made defenders freeze for a split second was vanishing. The power that opened every lane and created every miracle was slipping through his fingers. It wasn't age or laziness, it was the damage inflicted on him between 1998 and 2000. By his final season in Dallas in 2006, the light was nearly out. 26 points in 49 games. He retired on November 8, 2007, at just 34 years old. He told the press the cold, clinical truth: the head injuries ended him, not age, not desire. He confessed he couldn't admit it while playing, but the concussions had finally won. That level of honesty should have sparked a revolution in Philadelphia. It did. 2010 eligible for the Hall of Fame, passed over. 2011 passed over. 2012 passed over again. 13, 14, 15, 6 years of rejection. The only MVP since 1954 to be locked out of the Hall. A player with a higher scoring average than almost every legend inside was left out in the cold. He sat outside while the committee looked for any excuse to ignore his greatness. The voters kept their secrets, never explaining why they turned their backs on a king. But the whispers were always the same: his father, the drama, the character concerns. Character, think about what that word meant in this twisted context. His character flaw was refusing to play for an owner later exposed for serial harassment. It was having a father who fought for his son's basic right to medical care. It was criticizing a medical staff that had twice left him for dead in ways later confirmed. Those were his sins. Meanwhile, the manager who stripped his captaincy for speaking up was praised. The same management that tried to force a man with a collapsed lung onto a plane. Bobby Clarke was inducted into the Hall in 1987, long before the bridge was burned. Eventually, even Clarke had to face the truth and lobby for the man he betrayed. The call finally came in June 2016. The exile was over. Lindros was driving with his family when he got the news, inducted that November, 6 years late. But one question remains, not why it happened. The part is painfully clear. The darkness is easy to see now. A culture of silence, a manager using reputation as a blade, and a staff valuing stats over souls. A media that fed on the easiest lies rather rather than the hardest truths. The real difference, Lindros had called, his father documented every betrayal, every letter, every lie. He refused to let his son be another sacrificial lamb on the altar of hockey toughness. When the Flyers tried to bury the truth, Carl fought back with a paper trail. Most players don't have that shield. They have a contract, a team doctor, and a muzzle. You play through the pain, stay silent, and trust the people meant to protect you. How many stars returned to the ice while their brains were still bleeding? Not out of bravery, but because no one was willing to burn the bridge to save them. How many legacies were written off as lost motivation when the players simply ran out of life? When the real story was a tragedy hidden behind a mask, a silent, dark void unrecorded because no one dared to fight back, the truth vanished. The players stayed quiet while the machine ground forward. At just 23, the damage that would haunt his future had already taken root. He gave the city his soul. They repaid him with a 30-year lie. If the truth shattered your perspective, share it with those still blinded by lies. Who truly deserves the blame for this tragedy? Drop a comment and give your verdict. Subscribe now. More legendary tales of blood and betrayal are waiting for you. I will see you in the next chapter.